What is up, everyone? Welcome to Fantasy Football Across America. Anand, very happy to have you on. I'm great to be here in Chicago. How's your day been?
Good, man. It's good to see you, Dario. It's been too long. It's been, a month and a half now since we were in Canton together. So excited to get together and talk about fantasy football, something that we both love.
Yeah, no, I knew as soon as I had decided to travel around the country in this particular fashion and get to all these major cities, the next logical step was to do like these in-person shows with everyone. So very awesome to be able to be joined by you and have you here. And awesome stuff. And before we get started, we're going to get into it. But first, we got to run a quick ad from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be right back, folks.
Hey, so many ask me, what's wrong with sportsbooks? Why so many of them fail? The answer is simple. They don't innovate. They're just casino sportsbooks on a phone. That's all they've been. There are a few that are doing a good job. We partner with them. Most of them, not so much. Until Bet Openly came along. Bet Openly said, hey, we're going to innovate. We're going to do something groundbreaking. We're going to have peer-to-peer betting in all states, and you pay 1%. When you win, you pay just 1% on your winnings. You heard that right. It's 1%. With code Underworld, you qualify for just that 1% transaction fee on Bet Openly. It gives you ultimate flexibility to set your own lines and browse lines that others have set. Think about it. That's what betting should be. And now that is the reality. BetOpenly.com. The code is Underworld. Check it out.
Welcome back to Fantasy Football Across America. I think this is episode 8, maybe. I can't believe it's already been this far. We just wrapped up week 4 of the season. We're actually recording during Monday Night Football. So that's how much we love making this show, is where we could be watching Monday Night Football right now. But Anand, again, thanks so much for coming on. I like to just kind of give people the backstory behind their favorite fantasy analysts. And I'm curious, like, what got you into fantasy football? Do you remember the first league you played in?
Yeah. So the first league that I played in was not your typical standard league. It was Yahoo. There was a live draft in the basement of our freshman dorm. And the funniest part about it is, obviously, knowing what I know now, I understand how absolutely sicko the rules of this league were. It was a 2-quarterback IDP league that had, and obviously knowing nothing, I knew about football, but I didn't know about fantasy football. Not like that anyway.
That's like straight off the deep end, right?
Oh, there. Yeah. I mean, they threw me into the deep end immediately. And I remember, in the basement of our freshman dorm, and, we're all hungover on Sunday, and, it's a live, there's no notes. I have no notes prepared for anything. And our Wi-Fi notoriously in our dorm sucked. So basically we're doing, either you have sheets prepared and you have everything in Excel somewhere, or you're drafting blind because you've got 12 dudes that want to get through this. And, as quickly as you can, you're trying to figure that out. So that was trial by fire for sure. My first time.
Do you remember, like, give me some names who were at the top of this draft board? Like what era of fantasy are we talking?
This is 2010. And so, my first pick was Tom Brady, which I think I did all right with, but that's not really the story here. The story is I was still, feeling it from the night before, and I literally could not think of NFL players at that moment. So my second ever pick ever in fantasy football was Chad Henne.
Oh, wow. Was he at least the starter that
year?
Yes,
he was the starter. He was the starter. Arian Foster somehow made it to the 4th round. I go back with my college roommate Josh and laugh about this all the time. Like that league was just wild. Like everything about it was hilarious. And, those guys still stay in touch. And it's funny to watch, you see yourself grow as you do this over time. And, you fall into your own biases and, this guy burned me once. He's not going to do it again. Mm-hmm. But it's so funny to look back at stuff like that back when, we were just doing standard Yahoo leagues in, 2010, 2011, 2012 as you go on. And now you've got, these crazy DFS games and all the stuff that we do now. It's just crazy to see how far the space has grown.
No, it's crazy to think back. But
Mm-hmm.
Is that league still together? Like, how long do you remember?
No, that it was just that 1 year, for us. But it was, dude, that was intense. That was a big Peyton Manning year. There were, gosh, I can't even remember everything that went down. I just remember looking back at it at the end of the year, Arian Foster in the 4th round, after he flashed super crazy as a rookie. And I remember, or I can't remember, it was just the first opportunity that he really got. And you're like, wow, like, had anybody in this league actually known what they were doing, there's no chance that he goes in the 4th round. So it's just funny to look back at that stuff sometimes.
Yeah, no, it truly is awesome. And then when did you start getting into Dynasty leagues?
That was 2020 for me. Was my first real invite to Dynasty. Somebody asked me about helping them make a trade, and I was like, I do not understand what's going on here, but sure, I'm willing to learn. Why not? And in a couple of them, but it gets Dynasty trading, especially, makes the off season so much more interesting than it otherwise would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we don't acknowledge an off season here because we don't
There
get
is
an
no
off
off-season.
we don't get an off season. The NFL calendar is built so that we don't have any time period. There's always some kind of news to talk about, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed, the way that I look at things. And I think, something that we have to acknowledge, and I've talked to Linda about this and a few other creators in the space. If you specialize in Dynasty, sometimes those takes that you have on Dynasty players will seep into redraft, and it makes you an actively worse redraft player because you're not worried about anything past this 1 year, which is always fun, right? We're overvaluing rookies. We're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but that's what we do. So it's been a lot of fun to kind of learn the nuances between playing redraft, Dynasty, best ball, and kind of all the formats that we have now.
Yeah, no, it's awesome just getting to dip your toes in all these different ways. And then I was thinking too, like you said, any piece of news, any day of the year, changes everyone's Dynasty value. It's crazy. There really are no days in the off season. And then how did you get kind of looped into Player Profiler? Like, do you remember this backstory of how you started your podcast with Matt?
Yeah. So actually the first, Player Profiler pod that I was ever on was Codebreaker with Josh Larkey. And I don't remember if it was the first episode or not. I want to say it was. And I think he cold reached out on a DM. And I think that's how that went down. And then, a couple months later, that episode still gets referenced. People still talk to me about that particular show. I think that was March of 2021. And then from there, a couple months later, Josh reached out and was like, hey, I think you should talk to Matt about doing a show. I don't know what the format's going to look like. We don't know what the name is going to be, but there's something there. Why don't you try and go ahead and do that? And so Decision Point came out in, I believe, July of 2021 for the first time. And that's where Matt and I talk about contracts and the actual job of a GM, which, is very different than a head coach, and the timelines should look different. What we should be looking for from them is different, but they kind of get lumped in together and kind of judged one in the same, which, we try to break down and talk about on our show. But it's been 2+ years of great stuff. The people really liked the content, and, we've gotten a lot of really great feedback about it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, I think that you guys take that sort of bigger picture lens that is missing a lot of the time. And it's kind of especially missing from that fantasy space, just understanding team and roster construction from truly the top down. It's definitely a great show. Anyone listening to this is probably listening to that. But if any new listeners here aren't familiar with Decision Point, and then, what's kind of give us the background of what informs your view as someone who's analyzing football? What led you to care and think so much about GM things, salary cap things?
Yeah. So, my jobs were always finance based before. And then obviously, had an opportunity to do something pretty special, working cap side for a lot of different things that we did for about 2 years. And so you get to see and interact with a lot of really cool people that have insight far beyond your years, right? I'm not I was never the quote unquote numbers guy, and it's not data crunching was never really my skill set. I'd much rather, take a data set that we find and contextualize it somehow. And so it was really cool, probably 2 or 3 years ago when I got the opportunity to start talking to people about why the salary cap matters, what actual GMs are looking for. Why did, the Browns give out these crazy contracts in the mid 2000s to hit the salary floor, which no one discusses. But at the same time, people are like, oh man, that was a really crazy contract. Well, is it really? How much guaranteed money are we actually giving? Do we, based on what's reported, did this come from the team side or did this come from the player and the agent side? And it's kind of funny to watch the chess match now because with the advent of social media, it's not all sent through ESPN anymore. Mm-hmm. Now you can do this on X, on Instagram. Things play out in real time that have tangible impacts towards, what franchises think of their star players, how agents have leverage, and, GMs go about their business. So it's become much more of a public forum thing than it ever was before. And so it's honestly, it's intriguing to kind of see, the PR stunt play out in real life as opposed to through ESPN as it used to be back in the day. But it's been really cool, man. And we really enjoy doing what we do, Matt and I, talking about the stuff we talk about.
Yeah, no, that's sick. And then I guess like kind of off that point, I know this isn't on our show sheet, but I'm going with the juices here. But like, who are like, name 2 or 3 teams that you think specifically stand out at like managing their cap situations really well, and then give us like 1 or 2 teams that you think are just like the egregious worst examples.
Yeah, I mean the worst example is obviously right now is New Orleans, and they built for this. So it's not like they mismanaged anything. It's not like they did anything wrong. The Packers are in the same spot after giving Rodgers all the money that they did and pushing that out. So those 2 teams, but they're prepared for this, right? The Saints and the Packers aren't historically bad franchises. They're just in a bad spot at the moment. But that's a calculated risk. And the Rams are, again, another team that's my squad. But they're in the same spot this year also, where, when you have that amount of dead cap money on your books and you've pushed stuff out year after year after year, what happens is now you need to draft well enough. You have to replace the production that you're not getting from the money that's on your contracts that's not there. It's why the Browns are in such a difficult spot with Deshaun Watson's contract, is because whether it's him or someone else, in order to field a relatively competent roster that can compete with the best teams in the league, they need to get $60 million worth of quarterback play out of the position, whether it's him or Dorian Thompson-Robinson or whoever it is. And that's just the way that the world works, in sports right now in terms of salary cap math. But as far as the teams that I think do a great job, I think Pittsburgh is one that comes to mind immediately. They're always, whether it was Evan Colbert, Omar Khan now, Baltimore, basically rinse repeat. They're 2 of the best organizations in the sport. And I think that, when you look at them not doing, some of the things that the Saints, the Packers, and the Rams did, which, are somewhat out of character for them also, depending on which team you're talking about. But they're always relatively competitive because the roster itself is good. The coaching staff is good. And they're aligned ownership all the way on down. And really the only thing that ruins their seasons, whether you're Baltimore or Pittsburgh, is injury. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you just can't account for in any logistical way. It's coming. There are teams that get bit by this every year. But, next season, looking forward for the people out there that are, wondering who is going to be in trouble in 24 and beyond when the Bills come due, the Chargers are the team you're looking at where it's about to happen in a big, big way.
Yeah, no, it's rough that they're another team that just gets always bit by the injury bug, it seems like. And then kind of staying let's veer, further into out of the fantasy realm into the real sort of like NFL analysis realm. Like, what do you think is, we're 4 weeks in, what's one division that's kind of surprised you the way it's played out so far? And like, yeah, give me that. I know we just.
Dario, it's the obvious answer in it's the division that nobody cared about preseason that suddenly became really, really interesting. It's the AFC South, and for those of you that do listen to Decision Point, Matt and I were talking about preseason, some of the stuff that if happens, what teams could make that leap that we don't expect, because every year there are a few that can. And we tabbed Indy and Houston as teams that aren't necessarily as far away as people think if they got, competent quarterback play and, Shane coming in and Bobby Slowick coming in to be the OC in Houston. When you take a young quarterback and you give them tools to succeed and trust in them to actually execute the stuff that you're throwing together, and they start to see it work in real time. Every single rep that Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud have taken has built confidence. And that's what's giving this, this AFC South race that wasn't supposed to be a race. Mm-hmm. Jacksonville's had some, bad mistakes, dropped balls. I think, despite what the numbers show, in terms of raw stats, I think Trevor Lawrence has played pretty well. But again, it's a quarterback-driven sport. We know that it is. And in CJ, the Texans have a young superstar that, not even Ohio State guy, I didn't see this coming. I mean, this is, we're talking about historic numbers here from a rookie. It doesn't make sense. Even half the stuff that's going on in Houston. Tank Dell appear out of nowhere. There's a resurgence of Nico Collins. You've got all kinds of really fun stuff going on there. And then you've got Anthony Richardson, who's bringing them back against a Rams team that looks resurgent. I mean, it's hard not to be excited about the AFC South as a division as a whole, but it also takes back one other thing here, where now you've got these 4 teams. Everybody in the division, other than other than Houston, has either a +2 or -2 point differential, which is nuts. So basically, they're all 500 and they all playing like they're 500. It becomes a race because who saw the Titans drubbing of Cincinnati coming? Nobody sat there and said, this is going to be a 20+ point loss.
Yeah.
I mean, it's forcing you to recalculate some of your thoughts on, not just this division, but the conference as a whole, because if you really look at it, find the objectively bad quarterbacks in the AFC, there just aren't many. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know what we've got in the AFC North, between Burrow, Watson, Lamar, and, their jury's still out on Kenny Pickett, but young. Then you've got, the Jets are supposed to have Rodgers, and we know they don't, but, in theory. And then you've got Tua playing bona fide MVP until this week. Josh Allen, who probably is the MVP thus far this season. And, you've got Mac Jones. And then you go out west. We know what the AFC West quarterbacks are outside of Jimmy G. And, we love Aiden O'Connell. And then you throw these guys in there. Now you're talking about 12 really premium quarterbacks in the AFC potentially. And it's going to change the landscape of how a lot of teams are forced to do things, just because we haven't had this many good quarterbacks. And I mean, really good quarterbacks in a conference, maybe ever. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why the AFC South particularly is so interesting to me, is because we didn't think this was going to be much of a race.
Right. And the fact that they're all 2-2 through week 4, like, I mean, we'll have to, I should have looked this up beforehand, but that can't be something that's happened very often in NFL history, to have 4 teams in the same division that are that evenly matched this early on. And then we just pulled up the odds here. Who do you like as kind of your best bet to take home that division at this moment?
I mean, I think you're getting a discount right now on Jacksonville, who are, plus 150-ish, give or take, depending on where you look. It's the same team we saw preseason. They've just had uncharacteristic mistakes. I don't think it's anything that's unfixable. I mean, you have a couple catches here, a couple not drops there. And I think we're looking at this team very differently. So, I mean, I think it's the exact same thing that we said about them preseason, which is they're one of the better teams in the conference. And, I think push comes to shove, I think they do have the best quarterback in that division. I do think that they have, a lot to build on. And especially as Calvin Ridley knocks some of the rust off, I think you're going to see that offense turn back into the dynamic machine that it was towards the end of last year. That really, I mean, say what you want about them, they were in it right to the very end in Kansas City, which is not something a lot of playoff teams can say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. And then you hinted at this with Tua and Josh Allen, but like, we can hit briefly on the MVP market right now. Are there any bets that stand out to you at this moment?
I think Lamar at 12-1 is one that I don't think he's getting enough credit for Baltimore being in the lead for the AFC North right now at 3-1. And obviously some of that has to do with Joe Burrow's injury. Some of that has to do with, the schedule that they've played. But I mean, he's doing this again. Bateman injured, Odell injured. He's doing it again with a cast of characters that was supposed to be better.
Ronnie Stanley has also been hurt.
Dobbins' Achilles injury, right? Like he's doing it. It's literally the same rinse, repeat again. It doesn't matter what you put around Lamar Jackson. He just continues to get it done. And I don't think, people have take lock on him from what he was before he was in the NFL. And I think they kind of painted him with a broad brush and said, well, he's a running quarterback. Yeah, but he's still a quarterback. He's one of the very good passers that we have in the league. And every time we have he has the ability to display it when he has actual weapons out there. He shows it to you. And so I think that especially given the fact that quarterback is MVP is a very narrative driven award, I think that there isn't a redemption arc there potentially to discuss. And, as long as Pittsburgh continues to struggle with quarterback play, and Kenny's there. And, as long as the Browns don't break out of their offensive funk, so to speak, and really put together weeks where they show that they can be a capable dynamic offense, we know how good the defense is. But you're looking at a team that suddenly now looks down at the rest of their division and really has an opportunity to put some ground between them and everybody else just with injury luck, which seems insane to say about this team. But they have Superman, and Lamar Jackson is more than capable of shouldering the load in those situations. He's shown it before. I think he'll show it to us again. But that's one that I think, I don't think if we simulate the rest of the season 12 times, I think more than one time he comes away with the MVP award.
Right. And I mean, if you think about the guys who are even at all contenders for the MVP right now, the only one who's won it before is Mahomes, right? The last 4 years of MVPs are 2 for Mahomes and 2 for Rodgers. We know Rodgers is not going to play anymore this year.
Yeah, that sucks.
I think, as far as having done it before, that's definitely a point in Lamar's favor right now. I definitely like that bet at 12-1. And then a little more broad question here, open-ended. What's your favorite football memory? Is there one game you've been to or watched that really stands out to you?
Yeah, it was actually when I visited your neck of the woods in LA for the Super Bowl. Obviously, it was Rams-Bengals in 2022. That's one that's going to stick with me forever. And, for obvious reasons, it was a Super Bowl. It was Rams-Bengals, which, I mean, Cincinnati's basically adopted as my number 2 team. I just love good quarterback play, and Joe's obviously been fantastic while he's been there. But also, everybody loves a good underdog story, and Cincinnati has absolutely been that. They were never talked about as the class of the AFC when Andy Dalton was there, when Marvin Lewis was there. This is a new era for them, quite frankly. And that game was just awesome for a number of reasons. To watch Stafford get his ring, to watch Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, all of that was awesome. But I think, the thing that really sticks out to me about that particular game, and I don't think anybody really talks about this much, is that was the AFC 4 seed versus the NFC 4 seed, which is one of the crazier results that we'll ever get in terms of, 2 teams meeting in the Super Bowl, because, the Rams obviously had some hype, but nobody was really talking about the Bengals as being one of those teams that could go in and do that. And to get all the way there and to have basically a game-winning drive and then a game-sealing, defensive play from Aaron Donald seems almost scripted.
Yeah, almost.
Almost.
Right. That was before the script writer joke made its way into the NFL stratosphere. And I mean, it's also hard to forget that Jamar Chase had Jalen Ramsey beat on that last play.
Yes, he did.
Where Aaron Donald got the sack. So that's a crazy game to have been to. How did you manage to score a ticket to that game even?
So we bought them. So basically a buddy and I were we were out and about after the AFC NFC championship games, which, by the way, that's going to be forever. You have those moments where you're on the playground shooting threes and you can't miss. Way back in the day, or you have a crazy little league game where you steal 3 bases and mash one over the fence. That's what the 2021 into 22 AFC and NFC playoffs were for me.
Oh yeah,
because The craziest part about that stretch was the only game that I got wrong that entire postseason was Bills Chiefs. And I was just sitting there like, this can't be happening, right? Like, this is not happening. So we decided that if the Rams won that game, knowing that the Chiefs had beaten, or that the Chiefs had lost to the Bengals would be going. We decided that, together, if the Rams go, we're going to go to LA. We're going to go to the Super Bowl. We'll pay up for the tickets, whatever it takes, and just go. And made a weekend out of it. And, I love LA. We were talking off camera about how much I love LA and, the town that you're from. But, that was a really special weekend. It did feel bigger because it was Los Angeles. It did feel bigger. It did not feel like a Rams home game, which is strange enough.
Too. Yeah. Like, it was like, that was kind of the big, I don't know if that was the first full season they played there. Cause how the Super Bowl gets awarded like years and years out.
Oh yeah.
But that was a big deal that it was this first Super Bowl at SoFi too.
Yeah. And I remember it was, back-to-back years of, home team winning the Super Bowl after Brady did it in Tampa. And so, I know that was a narrative that was talked about throughout that season. And to deal with the adversity that they dealt with in terms of, they bring in Odell, who is, upset with his role in Cleveland and, to his credit, justifiably so. But then for them to sign him and then Robert Woods to immediately be out for the rest of the season, suffering an injury in practice, literally that same day.
Yeah, that was nuts.
To save the season that way. And then just to watch how, they move the ball effortlessly in the first half before Odell gets hurt in the Super Bowl. And then, that last end of game drive was, Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp showing you why they're one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And at that point, the best receiver in the league. So it was basically a storybook start to finish. Fairy tale doesn't even begin to describe it. Ending to a game, ending to a season. But I think it was a lot of fun to just kind of remember the stops to get along there. And the most under talked about thing, I think, is I legitimately don't know. I'm not sure if Sean McVay has ever beaten Kyle Shanahan other than that one game in the NFC Championship game. I can't recall him winning another game against Kyle, but if you're going to get one, get that one.
Yeah.
And that was, so there were just craziness all around. Ticket prices were absolutely nuts, but that's a memory of a lifetime and, don't regret it for a second.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely priceless. It's funny because I actually got to see the rematch, in Cincinnati last Monday night. I was there at that game, and that was pretty cool to kind of those rosters have already changed so much, but the energy around this Bengals team now, like you're saying, is so different than like what you normally think of for the Bengals.
Yeah, they're not the same old Bengals. The guy in a number 9 jersey strolled into town, and they've been looking pretty different ever since.
Yeah. And then I guess, I like to, do a little bit of non-football talk with this show too, just kind of give the people a chance to get to know you as a person as well. I think that's something really valuable that we don't see or hear enough of in this fantasy football space.
For sure.
So, just tell me, I think, first off, what do you enjoy about living in Chicago? Like, while I'm here in your hometown, sell me on it.
This is, especially no one needs to sell you on summertime in this city. If you've ever been here in the summer for any amount of time, you get it. They call it summertime shy for a reason, and that makes, the winter time here worth it. But I think, especially for people that want to live in a big city that has all 4 seasons, that is a great sports town, that has stuff to do. There's a bar on every corner here. And, depending on which neighborhood you go into, they'll be talking about the Hawks, they'll be talking about the Bears, but it's also a big enough city where, for example, being a USC guy, there are, if you want to go to a USC bar for game day, they exist. It's a big enough city that there is a bar for every major, college team, pro team in America. And one of the things that I think is super underrated about Chicago in particular, and we were talking about this off camera, is everything in the city is walkable. You can, take the L, which is our, what we call the train here. You can take the L basically anywhere in the city. If not, you can take a bus. A lot of it's super walkable. And, yes, winter here is rough. I can't lie to you about that one, especially as a Southern California kid. I can't lie to you about that. Winter is rough, but the other 3 months here more than make up for it. And it's been a wonderful Midwestern place to live. It definitely has its own unique feel. Even each neighborhood has its own spot. I like to tell people that no matter where you're from, you can find something that feels like home in Chicago, and I think that's what makes it special.
That's really cool. And then, are there any spots that I should absolutely be sure not to miss while I'm here for the next couple days?
Yeah, so we'll go to one after this that'll take you down to. It's called Over Under Sports Bar. I know John Daigle and a few others have been up there. I've taken Connor Allen. I've met him there when Dalton was in town. I took him there. So it's kind of a sports book experience, but made into a bar theme. And it's really, really cool. Highly recommend, especially if you're in Chicago for a little bit. It's not a far walk from Wrigley, which also has their own sports book with DraftKings now. But that'd be my number one stop as someone, that's into sports the way we are. And, especially when it's football season, you can't really beat it.
Yeah, no, that sounds sick. I'm excited to go. We're headed there just after this. And then what's something like a hobby of yours that you enjoy outside of, sports altogether?
Yeah. So, once upon a time, really, really long time ago, I was heavy into sneaker collecting and fashion and all that. That I'm still there, but that kind of changed over time. And now it's more, it can be, my mind runs 24/7 on football at this point. So it's hard to think of other things, but obviously sports in general play a huge part in my everyday life. Big basketball guy. That was actually my first love, even before football. Fallen out of touch with it a little bit just because, doing what we do, you have to be on top of the news cycle 24/7. But one of the things that I actually do really love is whiskey. And I had the conversation with Cody, 2 years ago when we were at the draft. I don't know if that was on stream or not. But I've gotten really into scotch, bourbon, whiskey flights, whatever it is. It's just expanded my horizons in a way that I didn't know, something like that could. And so people have told me to get into wine. It's coming. Eventually we'll get there. It's just as you're sitting there watching, the Bears offense from this year, it's been rough until week 4 where people are like, Anand fixed the Bears. I'm like, guys, this is not a wave the magic wand and someone will come save you kind of fix. So excited to get into that. But yeah, I mean, varied interests. I love, getting the time to talk to people about what they're passionate about, because obviously as passionate as we are about this, I think in 2023 and beyond, everything that you love can be a career if you find a way to let it. And I think that's one of the things that I've gotten passionate about telling people, because, the jobs that we do, if you told, 15-year-old Dario, this is what you'd be doing, you'd laugh, because this job didn't really exist 10 years ago. But it's funny how quickly that thought process changes as you go about doing things. And it excites me to no end to see kind of where this industry is going and what we're all going to be able to do with it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then kind of along those lines, like, what's something that you think is a challenge that doesn't get talked about enough with regards to like doing what we do, thinking about football, content creation, that whole beast?
Yeah. I mean, the toughest part is you're on your phone 24/7. Like it's hard because so much of what we do is information driven. And so you're scripting out, right? You have this 9 to 5 job for most people. And then after that, you get into your content creation side, your schedule about when you're creating, how you're creating, what ad you've got to read this week. It's, did someone so-and-so get hurt while I was, out at the park with the kids, or while I was doing this. So if this isn't your job, 24/7, I think that makes it hard, because, we're sitting here on a Monday night recording this, and, you're traveling all over the country trying to find content to create. And I think this is a really, really good one, especially because you're getting to take in all of these awesome games at these sweet venues. But one of the really cool things that we get to do is we're on top of the news cycle all the time. We sometimes get to break news. The draft was a key part of that, right? We were there as media members and got to break the news to everybody, as, Anthony Richardson gets drafted, I believe it was. And, it was awesome to be there. It was awesome to be a part of it. And those are the kinds of events, and doing stuff like this is the stuff that makes this job rewarding. It never feels like work, but there's a lot of work that goes into it. And, you know, one thing just for anybody out there that's listening to this that thinks, you know, I could do that, I could create content on my own. Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. And you should. If you're interested in doing it, do it. The only way to get better at this is just to keep doing it over and over and over again. And you're going to mess things up. It's not going to be great the first 20 times. You're going to listen to your voice and wonder why you said that. I still do that. You know, it's one of those things where if you love something enough, it's going to show up every time you get on camera, every time you speak to people about something. And, you know, if this is really what you love, do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, you put it as well as anyone could. Is there any final thoughts before we let you go? Any let the people know where they can find you?
Yeah, so it's at Nanduri NFL on X. You can find me on Decision Point with Matt Kelley, aka the Podfather, whenever we decide, because that's not a show that on the Player Profiler Network. They've asked us to make it a consistent weekly thing. We try to make it when we have enough information to pack into a show, so we're not giving you, you know, whatever the take of the week is, as opposed to, because most of what we do is long-term thought. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed this thoroughly, and, you know, excited to see your USC Trojans doing big things this year. You know, Caleb Williams, there are a lot of people in Chicago that are clamoring for your boy. So it's been exciting, but man, we got to get Alex Grinch out of there.
Yeah, I know that defense. I mean, I'll trust it once we start getting to, I mean, we're playing Washington. I was, you know, checking the schedule, like, see if the Pac-12 gets those.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, is this a Washington and Oregon year? Ooh.
Yeah. They've got they're Notre Dame's on that schedule. That's not a joke, ladies and gentlemen. That is a tough schedule.
Well,
and
they play Utah and Notre Dame back-to-back, and then they play Washington and Oregon back-to-back in November. They had their bye in week 3. I was like, they're going to be running on 10 weeks straight of football when they play, you know, Washington and Oregon down the stretch there.
And I mean that the funny part is, you know, you're going to have your defense stressed one way when you play Utah and Notre Dame that are ultra physical, old school smash mouth football teams. And then you get to Washington and Oregon, and it's like they're playing a completely different sport. Yeah. So that's a really tough challenge in back-to-back weeks for anybody, but to have both of those on the schedule back-to-back, that is a wild stretch of football, and will tell us a lot about, you know, what Caleb Williams' ceiling as a college football player looks like. Note to self, it's very, very good. He's ridiculous. But also, you know, there's still chatter about, will Caleb be the first guy to win 2 Heisman since my guy, Archie Griffin?
We'll have to keep tuning in to find out. Well, that's it for this episode of Fantasy Football Across America. Thanks so much for coming on, Anand, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.